Okay, I think we are good now. Sorry for the delay, 4 minutes late. I was battling with sometimes GitHub does strange things, so I was trying to get everything in line. Especially because now I'm dealing in this project, especially I'm dealing with 3 GitHub repositories, one for the demo, one for each package. So sometimes things get mixed up. But I think I got it under control. In fact, let me just go and make sure that I think this one is the one that I don't like. Even though we haven't touched the carousel itself, let me just make sure that we are in the right branch. This is week 6, I believe. Already exists. Okay, so it says new. Okay, and I think this one is already in week 6, the carousel demo, and finally this one is week 6 as well. All right, I think we're good. How's everyone doing? Thank you for joining me again on another live stream. Let's continue working on the info list carousel. Last week we had the thing working as a custom info list component inside the package, and this week we are going to work on adding all of the functionality that we already have in the Blade component. That is looping, autoplay, setting the delay, orientation, all of that. And also we are going to make sure that the user can provide their own template for each slide. And I have Vid server running. Okay. Let's see, where do we begin? So I think we can, the best place to start would be the template thing, because that is going to give us an idea of everything else. So the way that I want this to work, if we go to, in our demo project, resources, views, Livewire, info list demo. That is the template, but I need the component actually. So Livewire, info list demo. So what I want to do is the following. I want to have a function here that will allow me to say slide template, or slide view actually. Slide view. I hope that's clear enough. And here I should be able to just say like something like resources, views, something like components, info list, carousel, slide, something like this. I mean, you can choose any name you want. I'm just choosing to put everything in like a standard folder, everything within components, info list, the kind of component, the kind of package that we want, and then the view. But the name can change and everyone can choose their own name. So I want to have these available, but also we should provide a default template. If I don't choose one, the package should have a default template that will be provided if nothing is chosen. So let's start by setting the default one. So I'm going to comment this out. And let's go to the carousel component. And let's see. Let's define another protected string. Let's call it default slide view. And this will be in our package. So info list Carousel, Infolist, components, Carousel, slide, because the carousel is everything is in the folder called components, so I don't want to create another folder, so I'm gonna just use a hyphen here. So that'll be the default one. And how is the default going to look? Let's see. Save this first. So right now we examine our carousel.blade.php file for this Infolist component. Why? Hold on a second. This PC is somehow, for some reason, starting theme. I don't want that. Thank you. All right. So this is what we have right now. So what I want is to change this and extract all of these, because that is actually the view for the template. Sorry, the view for the slide. So let me extract this, and actually let's first create the new file. So it's in views, component, Infolist components. We have the carousel one, and then create a new file here called carousel slide .blade.php. Okay, now we can just, for now I'm just gonna copy it, right, do any changes, and just paste it here. I guess what I can do is just say, for the time being, take this, change it to include, and I'm going to need a function here, something that will give me back the template name. I'm going to use include from Blade template, and the good thing about include is that every variable that is available to the parent or whoever used the include method is going to also be available to the child view or the included view. In this case, that'll be state, so I don't have to pass that down to the included template. It's just going to be available to it. But I still need a function here. Let's call it maybe, say, get slide view. So I want to have a method get slide view that is going to give me that template, the default one, or in a little while is going to be either the default one or the one chosen by the user. So let's save this and let's work on that method here. I'm going to close this for now. So let's say public function get slide view. Is that how I call it? Yes, get slide view. And for now, let's just return this default slide view. That should work. And it does. Okay, so now, instead of running the slide template or this content here directly into the Infolist template, now it's running on an external template file. So now let's work on giving the user the option to customize that template. Let's start with what I want to do. So back to the Infolist demo. As I said, I want to have a slide view method where I can pass in my template. So let's work on that method first. Let's move this here and let's create that method up here. What did I call it? Slide view. So now here the user can pass a string, and that will be the template. Important when you're creating methods for configuring your Infolist components or your filament components, whatever kind of component it is important that these methods return static. And in fact, let's just say right away, return this. If you do this, you ensure that you can keep chaining methods one after the other. Just like you use any filament component, you chain a variety of methods to configure that component, and the way that you achieve that chaining is by returning static and just returning this or the class in that method. Now, what do we want to do here? I don't want to modify the default one, so let's turn this into a private one. This one is not going to be modified by the user, and instead say protected string slide view can't call it slide view because that's already the method name, so let's call it slide template. Now this can either be a string or no. I'm gonna account for the possibility that the user does not provide anything here. So let's say this can either be string or no. Now, when I call this slide view, I'm going to say this slide template equals template. And then down in the get slide view, I can say check first. Let's say this slide template, sorry. But if that's new, then return the default slide view. And that should work. Right now, let's just save, make sure that it didn't break. And it didn't, that's great. Now what happens if we provide one ourselves? Let's actually create one. In the demo project, let's go to resources, views. Let's create a new folder here. Again, this is optional. You don't have to do this, but I choose to keep things organized. So let's go with components. Infolist. Slide.blade.php. That's my name. And let's just, for now, for the sake of this example, let's just copy the default one and then paste it here. And all I'm going to do, just to signify that this is a custom one, I'm just going to include the word custom just before the state value. Okay, now let's go back to the carousel component here. No, the Infolist demo, sorry. Going to uncomment this, and I called it Infolist component Infolist. I didn't set the slide folder, the carousel folder, did I? Sources, views, components, Infolist. Actually, let's make that new folder, carousel. Let's move this in here. There you go. Components, Infolist, carousel, slide. Let's see if that works. Save, go back here, and sure enough, we have our custom slide template. Now let's rework this first method, because down the line, most of the methods that I'm going to create for configuration are going to follow the same convention. So might as well start with this one. And that convention is that for the most part, on any method that you use on a filament component, you can either pass a value or call a closure. And I want to follow that in here. So how is that going to look? Let's just say, for example, for the sake of this example, I want to, instead of just passing that value, I'm going to add a shorthand function here and simply return that value. And why are you not working? Right. So the first problem is that slide view template, this slide view function, sorry, only accepts string parameters. So I need to modify that to accept a closure. So let's go to carousel here. And in here, I can accept either a string or a closure. Like so. Now, in order for this to work, I have to do something slightly different on my get slide view, because I can no longer return just slide template or check the value for slide template like I'm doing here, because slide template, it can be either a string or a closure. So I need to evaluate that closure before even attempting to make a check on it. And the way that we do this, fortunately, Filament already provides a method for this. So I can say slide template equals to this, sorry, no, yeah, this evaluate this slide template. And down here, I can just check for the local slide template variable. And okay, like that. Slide, oh, looks like I made several mistakes here. Template. Okay, that seems to be okay. All right, so now we have a way to evaluate that. Is it going to work? Let's see. I'm going to save this first and then go back to this section here and save. Let's go to the browser and Reload. Carousel slide template must not be accessed before initialization. What? Let's see, where did I go wrong here? Slide template, string no. I guess I just have to give it a default value of no. Yeah. Because I'm attempting to initialize it here for being accessed, I guess. Yeah, I'm accessing this slide template here. This gets called first because, well, yeah, I guess. So yeah, it's just a Filament being a bit finicky about that. You can access a template or a local property without having initialized it first. But that works. So now I went back to the default one and I didn't want that. Hold on. What am I getting out of this? In one new tab, please do as I say. So it's coming back no. How so? Let's see. I'm sure I'm passing a closure here. Let's check that. Remove this from here and move it up here. No, still? Really? Interesting. This is not null, that is a closure. Yeah, that is a closure. How come slide? Ah, of course. Sorry. You have to name things the right way. Cannot assign closure to property slide template of type string. Okay, so now we need to modify slide template because now it can either be a string, a closure, or no. Now we're back to our custom slide, but now the value that we're getting is coming from a closure function. And I want to also cover the scenario where the user, when calling any function, or at least most of the functions, the user should have access to the state of the component. And let's start with just the state, because we're going to see what happens. In any method in Filament, you can just say state, and that should give you the state of the component. And let's see what that looks like. We do, let's say dd state. What are we going to get out of that, do you think? We get the actual array of all of the slides in our component as we are defining it up here. Now, how is that happening? I didn't do it. Filament is doing it for me, but I want to take advantage of that to include another variable, which is not the complete array of the component of not the complete state array, but the current slide that I'm iterating on at that moment. So I want to give the user the ability to inject that as all of the injections or named injections on any closure. How do I do that? So let's go in a little hunting trip down Filament's code. If we go back to the carousel component here, let's examine what that evaluate function does. So in VS Code, you can press either F12, or I'm using Bing Motion, so I can just do GD. So that takes me to the definition of this evaluate function. What is that doing? It's taking in a value, and in this case, the value can be a closure, and in this scenario, it is. So if the value is not a closure, however, it's just going to return the value of that variable. If it is a string, it gives me the string. But what happens if it is a closure? So it goes past this section here and then initializes a dependencies array. Now, in this case, we are using a reflection function. This is from PHP. And a reflection function is going to give you an object that is a reflection of whatever you are passing in. In this case, it's a reflection of the function or the closure, that we are passing in. And on that object, we are calling, well, not we, Filament is calling get parameters. So that'll be an array of all of the parameters that are being passed into the closure. In this case, we are only passing, where is it? In this case, we're only passing the state parameter. So it's only going to be an array of one item, and that is state. Also notice that in this case, we are in a trait here. The trait is called evaluate closures, because we are going to get to a point where we need to implement the implementation of certain functions are going to be not in the trait, but in the implementing class. And we'll see how that looks. But for now, we're just calling a reflection function on the value on the closure and getting all of the parameters. And for each parameter, we are going to call this resolve closure dependency for evaluation. And to that, we're passing the current parameter and then an array of named injections and typed injections. This evaluate function takes not only the value or the closure that we are evaluating, but also an array of named injections and typed injections. In this example, we are going to use this one in just a few minutes. But first, let's understand how this works. So, resolve closure dependency for evaluation. And what are we passing here? The first parameter, which is state. Let's go and see what that does. First things first, the parameter is an object itself, and that object has several methods. One of them is getName. So we're getting the name of the parameter. In this case, again, it's state. Now, it is checking first that this parameter name, whether that parameter name exists on the named injections array. Since it doesn't exist because the array was never initialized, we didn't pass anything, so it's just an empty array, then this is going to be false. And then it's going to try and do a get type reflection parameter class name with that parameter. This is in the case of you trying, or the user trying to inject a parameter with a type. And let's see how that works. We go into this, we are going to get a type for that parameter. What type was that? In this case, is a built-in type. It is an array. The state is of type array in this case. So again, that parameter object has a get type function. When we get that, is checking if the type is an instance of reflection named type. It is not, so we wait. Okay, yeah, this is false. I'm not sure what this is, but this is going to be false. It's just an array. What it is going to return, then it's going to call type is built in. And in this case, this is also going to be false. Returns checks if it is a built-in type. In this case, I don't think it is. It's just a common variable, I think. No, actually, this is going to be true because array is a built-in type. So in this case, it's going to return null from this getReflection parameter class name. Because it is a built-in array, then it's going to return null. So let's go back. How do I go back? Was it? Hold on. I know how to do this. Nope. Was it this? Yeah. Okay. So we are back at this line, and now type parameter class name is null. And it's going to check if it is filled, and in this case it's not filled, it's null, so it's not going to return this value. In this case, what it's trying to do is, if it is not a built-in class and you try to inject a parameter with a class, it's going to try and match that class with a key inside the typed injections array. So it already tried to use the named injections array with the name of the parameter, and then it's trying to use the typed injections array, in this case with a class or a type. But none of that is true, so it's going to keep going. And now default wrap dependency by name. And the comment here says dependencies are wrapped in an array to differentiate between null and no value. So all of this is doing, if I'm not mistaken, is just, okay, this is a protected function that is not implemented in the trait. So who is implementing this? And my guess is that this is being implemented in the entry. Let's check. So let's go into entry, and what is the name of the function? Resolve default closure dependency by name. I'm gonna copy that and then try to find that in this entry class. It's not here. So let's keep digging. Let's go into component. And here I think it is implemented, yes. So this function that is implemented in the component class, which is the base class for all of Filament components, it's creating an array, basically taking the parameter name, and if it is record, it's going to it's going to use this get record and return an array with just that entry. If it is state, and this is the case, this is our case, because we are trying to pass a parameter name state, is just going to return this get state. And what does this get state returns? The entire state array. So it's going to return an array, that array wrapped in another array. So going back here, let's do Get back. Nope, keep going back. I lost it. Hold on. Carousel entry. No, carousel evaluate. I lost my track. We got into here. Solve validation. So we're here. So this default wrap dependency by name is going to, since we passed the named parameter called state, is going to be an array that contains the state array. And when we get to this if count default dependency by name, which means that there is at least one entry in that array, which there is just going to return that single entry. What entry that is? The entire state array again. So that is how Filament is injecting the value of our state using just the parameter name from the closure here. Right now we're going to use something similar, but in our case we are going to use the named injections. How is that going to look? What I want to do is not only provide the state of the component, but also being able to do something like slide state. So I should be able, or the user should be able to inject the state of the current slide. How am I going to do that? First of all, I'm going to go to the carousel component and into the evaluate method, I want to provide a second parameter for the named injections. I want the user to be able to inject a parameter and get the value solely using the parameter name slide state. So how do I do that? I provide a second parameter named injections, and the way that this works is you provide the key, and the key will be the parameter name slide state, and the second parameter is the value. Which value is that? Well, since we are making a call of get slide view from the components from this component's view, and let's go and check that out. If we go to where is it? Let's open carousel.blade.php from Infolist components, and here we are making the call to get slide view, but notice that we also have state available to this method, so we can just pass that in. So let's pass state into get slide view, save that. Now let's go into the carousel component, receive that parameter here, and this will be the slide state. And now we can provide that value to the named injections array. Oops. Now, how is this going to work? If you notice from the trip that we just took, the first thing that is going to be checked is whether the parameter name that I'm passing is a key in my named injections array. And this, in this case, the closure here is going to have two parameters. We already know how the state parameter is going to be injected, and then the second parameter is going to be checked against the named injections array and is going to return the value of that parameter, which is slide state. I hope that makes sense. So we save this here and then go back to Infolist demo, and let's try and output slide state and see what value do we get. In this case, it's going to be should be slide 1 because it's the first slide and we're going to stop there. Let's save that. And back here and refresh, and sure enough, now we have a way to access not just the entire state array, but also each and every slide that we are currently iterating on, and have that available as in the closure passed into the slide view method. In fact, we can just use that. We don't need to inject both. We can choose which one to inject, and it's still going to work. There you go. Now I can't think of an application for this, but again, it is not about having an application right away. It's just giving the user the standard behavior of Filament, where you can just provide a closure and you can inject all of the common parameters from Filament, that is the record, which is the model of the component, or just the state, or any additional parameters that we need, in this case slide state. All right, let's get rid of this for now. Let's go back to what it was. Let's just leave the default one. I'm not going to provide the slide view, and we're back to this. Awesome. Now we have, actually let me just leave that but comment it out. Slide view, components, Infolist, carousel, slide. Still working. Awesome. All right, that's one thing. How long did that take? Ooh, 42 minutes. Sorry, that was a long explanation, I guess. But the next two things that I want to implement, let's see how many we can get in just one go, in 1 hour. Now that we have this kind of a template, we can easily implement the rest of the functionalities. For example, we want to be able to say, let's say, we want to be able to call loop, and by default is the looping functionality is going to be enabled, but we should be able to just disable it for like using something like loop false. Right now, this is going to complain because of course there is no loop call. So let me close a few things here. I don't think I'm going to need this anymore. Actually, I do. So what I want to do is, instead of just hard coding this to true, and this is going to be, this needs to be a string. So what I need is enable, instead of doing this, I should be able to do something like loop, and in here call a method that is going to be get loop. Get loop. That method should give me a string of either true or false based on the configuration that we're going to create. Save that. It's going to complain. We don't care. And now let's add, what do we want? Do we need a default loop or just leave it as false? Let's start with just leaving it as false. So we have the default state view, and let's add something else here. So it's going to be protected. It's going to be bool, bool or closure. Can't call it loop because we are going to have a method called loop. So let's just call it is looping enable. unless by default this is going to be true. Okay, now let's work on the loop method. Public function loop. Oop. This is going to take either a boolean or a closure. By default, I don't think we need a default here. If we are calling this one, no, we do. So by default, this is going to be true again. This returns static. And what we want to do here is say this is looping enabled equals to loop. So if we call this without a value, it's going to be true. If we call it with a false value, it's going to be false. If we provide a closure, we just need to make sure, or the user needs to make sure that the return of that closure is a Boolean value. That falls under the responsibility of the user and the developer to document that feature. Now we need the get loop function. So let's do public function get loop. We're not going to pass any parameters here, and we're just going to say return. We need to do a check. Unfortunately, I wish I could just return the true or false value, but I've tested this, and when we pass this into the Alpine component underneath, it has to be a string, so that the string will then be transformed into an actual JavaScript Boolean. So let's just say, let's check on this. Wait, you need to assign the value. So is looping enabled, or just call it loop, equals to this. Evaluate is loop enabled, and then return is check loop. If this is equal, I'm going to use triple equality here to make sure that it is a Boolean, and if it is true, then return the string true. Otherwise returns false. All right, I think that's gonna work. So let's save this. And let's see if we have any lingering errors here. Are you going to loop? And it is actually not looping. How so? Of course, we set it to false, so it is actually working. What happens if we remove this? We just call loop with no value, then it should be looping by default. We go back and it is perfect. Awesome. And even if we don't call loop, it's actually comment that out. I didn't want to delete it. We comment that we don't use loop. The default behavior is to have loop enabled. Awesome. Okay, that's 1 out of 3, I think. We have loop. Let's work on the next one, which is orientation. Again, what I want to have is a property. The reason I'm using a colon in front of a property, this is a blade component thing. If you use a colon in front of a property name, you can, or you should use a PHP expression inside double quotes. If it is a hard-coded value like a string, you can omit the colon at the beginning. But if you are going to use a function in this case, or any value from a PHP variable, you have to use colon first, so that whatever is in double quotes here, it's going to be treated as a PHP expression. So what I want to have here is get orientation. All right. Same thing, same methods. So we're going back to Carousel. We are going to need the orientation. Oh, in this case, even though it's just two values, I want to follow Filament standard. And what Filament does is whenever there has to be a specific value passed into a configuration function, in this case, let's just say orientation, what they do is use enums. So what I want to do in this case is have an enum that is going to be called say carousel orientation, and I want this to be, let's call it vertical. So that's what I want. So for that, I'm going to need a new use case here. So use app. I'm going to put it in, where am I going to put it? No, it's not going to be in app. It's actually going to be in the package. So 2019-02 Infolist carousel Infolists components carousel we're going to have it in a folder, so let's call it carousel orientation. I think this is how the Filament does it. So let's create that enum real quick. This would be in the Infolist Carousel package. In the source folder, we have Infolist components. Let's create a new. Is it going to complain if I create a? I don't know. I don't think it's going to matter. Let's create a new folder here, and let's call it Carousel. That's good. Inside, we're going to create a new file called carousel orientation.php. This is going to be a PHP file, so it's like that. Namespace. It's going to be our vendor name, carousel components, Infolist components, carousel. Carousel. And then let's say enum carousel orientation. This is going to be of type string, and then we do, I think it's match, no, case vertical, sorry, horizontal, and that is equal to horizontal. horizontal, and that's the value that we are expecting. That, I guess that's not a fat arrow. That's just an equal sign. Okay. And that's basically what we are doing right now. We were just passing a hard-coded string, and that's what we are going to get out of this enum. And the other case is vertical. And now we have our enum. So let's go back to Infolist demo here. And let's see if that works. We do, yeah, there it is. We can just say vertical here, and that's going to give us back the value for that vertical entry. Yeah, that's what I want. So let's work on this method, orientation. This, let's go into the carousel component. We already have a protected bool. Let's add one more property here. So this is going to be, again, protected. And in this case, we want to have the value from a an enum. So either a carousel orientation or a closure. And let's set this by default to carousel orientation horizontal. What is your problem here? Oh, variable name, of course. So this will be called carousel orientation. All right. Now let's create that configuration function here. So we have slide view loop, and let's create one more for public function orientation. This takes in carousel orientation or closure. Of course, this has to return static. Just so I don't forget, let's return that right away. Okay, let's say this carousel orientation equals to orientation. Now we need the get orientation method down here. So public function get orientation and again, let's say orientation equals this evaluate this carousel orientation. Finally, return orientation, and because this comes from an enum, or this is an enum value, actually what comes is an enum, so I want to use the value method here so that I get the string representation of that enum case, if that makes sense. So I'm going to get either horizontal or vertical as a string, all lowercase. Go back here. Apparently you are complaining about something. Expected type, Infolist Carousel, Infolist components. What are you talking about? Did I not? Guess I didn't import this, right? Ah, there it. No, wait. Where's the use case? There it is. Okay. And now the squiggly line is gone. So now we can call orientation vertical. And let's see how that looks. How's that? Did I make an error in the cases here? Stop being, there we go. Yeah, horizontal. There is no value? Maybe it's not a function, I guess. It's just a property. Where was it? Yeah. And it works. How cool is that? It's looping, it's vertical, it's awesome. Do we have time to cover the last one? Let's see. We're just over an hour. What are we missing? I think the only thing that is missing is the two things. Whether to autoplay and also how much of a delay. Now, the method that we're going to use for those two is exactly the same as we have been doing here. So we want a, what was it? Autoplay. This is a Boolean. We want a method that says get autoplay. And also delay. This is an integer in milliseconds, and we would like to have another method here called get auto delay. Get autoplay delay, or just get delay, whatever you feel more comfortable with. You feel get delay is explicit enough, that's fine. So as I said, the process of adding those two methods is exactly the same, and then what we want in terms of usage is to have two methods. Sorry. We have an autoplay method here that, if called without anything, is going to be false by default. No, actually, if we call it, it's going to be true. If we don't call it, it's false by default. So if we say autoplay, then it's going to start autoplay. And we also need a delay, and this is going to take a default of 4000 milliseconds. And if we provide a value, let's say 2000, for example, then that is going to be the delay. Here is what we're going to do, because I really want you to learn these steps. Again, it's going to be very similar. You're going to need a property here with the default value that you want. You're going to want to create another function here that returns this static and sets the value for that property, which is protected always. And then the get function that is used to get that value out using evaluate, making sure that that property that that we are defining, I keep saying you're going to define because, as you can see, you know what I'm going with, where I'm getting at. I want you to try and add those two functionalities by yourself. Try to add these two methods, autoplay and delay, and this method here, get delay and get autoplay. Try to get those two functioning and working on your own, and next week we're going to see the answer for those two, which again is going to be exactly the same process that we have been doing with the rest. But I do want you to exercise and practice and solidify the knowledge so that you can get accustomed to creating this kind of properties, methods, or configuration for filament components. How's that? If that's something that you are interested in, then yeah, just practice. That's the key. But for now, we are going to leave it here. We have a working configurable component that we can use as an Infolist entry. And I guess next week, we can start looking into packaging this and just preparing this for an actual deployment. So yeah, I'm gonna go through all of the code and see if there is anything that we need to improve or rework, and then we can move on into the process of putting this as an actual package that people can download. There's going to be the thing of documentation, and that's the boring part. I don't know if I want to bore you with that section, or I can work on that off camera and then show you what I did, but I'll make a decision in this next week. In either case, if you found any of this helpful, don't forget to leave me a like. It's always helpful. Thank you so much for all of the love throughout this last 2 years. We're about to cross 5,000 in August, I think, if the predictions are correct, and that is just amazing. So keep showing love, leave me a like if you like this content, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and as always, see you in the next one.